Hello, everyone, and welcome to this course, The Philosophy of Death. This video is just an introduction to the themes of this course. The website in its current state is still being put together, but all of that stuff will be available to you by the beginning of the course. This video is just to give you a sense of the intellectual journey that you'll be going on in the next 8 weeks in exploring some of the themes, some of the philosophical themes that have to do with the specific subject of death. This, as you see, is our website, our Blackboard site, and everything is here. Everything that you need to do and read is here. All the texts have been uploaded. And you'll see that in the main menu, the class is organized by week. Each week, for instance, if we go to week 1, this is week 1. Again, the materials are still being put together. There'll be various things here for you to do. But you'll always find the reading. And the first week's reading is Epicurus' letter to Menoicus, which has a very special place for this class. If you look at the weeks, the first 4 weeks each has an individual reading by a different author. And then the last 3 weeks, weeks 5 through 7, we'll look at a longer reading by a single author, and we'll read it piece by piece. We'll end up reading the whole thing and discussing the whole thing. So in one sense, you can think of the class as having 2 parts. The first 4 weeks and then the second 3 weeks. I'll tell you why I did that. And I'll also qualify the notion that the class is actually in 2 parts. Because it's really one part, I guess, or one overarching sort of theme, or you might say goal of the course that's being pursued. The first 4 weeks do start with our first reading Epicurus, and we'll read Epicurus' actual letter in the first week, and then the next 3 readings are all, in some sense or another, an attempt to work out the puzzles that Epicurus's brief but incredibly deep statements about death, the puzzles that it raises. Nagel's death, Van Ever's death as limit, and then Gray's presentation of the idea of death and existentialism. And all of them more or less presuppose that Epicurus was basically right, that he was basically correct, or that he had the proper or correct conception of what death is. We'll see that especially in Nagel's essay, that he argues very strongly against one of the things that Epicurus says, the notion that death can actually be said to be a bad thing for the person who dies. And the whole essay is an argument against that implication of Epicurus's conception of death. But we'll see that that is a secondary issue. That is, Nagel does not dispute the correctness of Epicurus's basic conception. It's a sort of a secondary implication of that conception that he has problems with. And the other authors too, especially Glenn Gray in week 4, will have their differences with Epicurus. But basically, the first 4 weeks are looking at death within an Epicurean perspective. And what that really means is that Epicurus' notion that he was basically right, and that death is the end of all experience, of all perception and awareness, and that when we die, we are utterly and completely annihilated, literally made into nothing. Now, that is a view of death which I have a lot of sympathy for. And really, the first 4 weeks are really working that out. Like, what are the conceptual sort of rules of that? How we talk about it, how we think about it. What are the implications for the notion that death is a bad thing or an evil? What is a limit? if death is simply the limit of life, what is in week 4 in Gray's essay, what is the meaning of that? How does it affect the way we live? If we look forward to this utter and absolute annihilation of ourselves, how does that figure into the way that we think about the meaning of our lives? So the first 4 weeks are all really, in one way or another, an exploration of Epicurus, and an exploration that presumes that Epicurus is more or less correct. And then we come to what, in a certain sense, is the second part of the course, but in another sense, it's just a continuation of these explorations of Epicurean themes. And that is Paul Landsberg's long essay, brilliant essay, The Experience of Death. I have my own thoughts, I suppose, which are merely opinions about the nature of death, but I am open. And especially as a teacher, I think that to teach a whole course which presumes that Epicurus was basically correct, that is, that death is the absolute and final end of human existence, of each one of our individual existences, that would be unfair. I know that in a class, were there 30 people in this class? Is that possible? I don't know. There are bound to be people who have very strong beliefs about an afterlife. I would put it in these terms, very strong beliefs about the survival of the person of death. That is, that Epicurus was wrong, that death is not the absolute end of all of our experience, that death is not annihilation. Paul Landsberg, The Experience of Death, in my opinion, and I haven't read, that much, but I've read some stuff in the history of philosophy on the notion of survival of death or an afterlife or the persistence of the person through death and after death. I think Paul Landsberg's essay is probably the best thing I've ever read. Certainly, I think the greatest attempt on the part of a Christian author and a Christian philosopher, which Landsberg was, to defend the idea of some notion of immortality and afterlife, not on the basis of simply religious faith, which is another thing altogether than philosophy, which is about arguments and reason and what we can say on the basis of what we can actually know and things like that. Not a specifically faith-based notion, but really looking into it as a philosopher. Why does he believe that Epicurus was basically wrong in his conception of death? So you can think of the class as having 2 parts. Weeks 1 through 4, which is really the exploration of the Epicurean view, and then weeks 5 through 7, which is really Landsberg's attempt to argue against or to refute or to go beyond or show the limits of the Epicurean view and offer something else in its stead. Or you can think of the class as one long series of responses to Epicurus's view of death. So I would, the class starts with week 1, Epicurus's letter to Menoikos here. And it's really not that difficult a reading. And what it has to say about death, within a short reading, it's amazing. Even within a short reading, it's only a few sentences that are really relevant to what we're doing here, or directly relevant at all to what we're doing here. So the class starts with a very firm grasp of what Epicurus was saying about death. And then that makes everything else comprehensible in a way, because everything else is a kind of response to that. So welcome to the course. It is going to be an intellectual journey, sometimes demanding. It takes close reading. Not all the texts are that easy to read at first. There will be videos that will hopefully help you in your reading and various other things. You will have various assignments to do during the course of the semester, exams and essays and such, and they'll be dealt with in the syllabus and perhaps another video.